She speaks with her own voice and walks her path fiercely. Every day she looks a challenge in the eye. She's a strong woman who doesn't just stand up for herself. She stands up for everybody else. Here we are in 2022. Are there any new guidelines or rules in regards to personal injury law?
Here we are in 22, yes. The guidelines have remained the same. However, what's happened is we now understand that the global pandemic is here and this is our new reality. So everybody's much more vigilant in making things happen within the new environment and the new setting. So during the height of the pandemic, everybody was reserved and pulled back, whereas now everybody's coming to the table and saying, okay, this is our reality. What do we need to do to achieve the task that we're given? And that applies to settling cases, that applies to evaluating injury, and that also applies to going to trial and getting the settlements that our clients deserve.
So slowly going back to normal.
With the new reality.
With the new reality.
Yes.
What has it been like to return to office settings?
Well, Ashalus, as you know, our office really never closed. We've remained open for our clients because just because there is a global pandemic, it doesn't mean injuries stop. But it's very nice to come back to the idea of we're open, we're present, and we're trying to push through the injury settlements for our clients. We're seeing a lot more cooperation with the insurance carriers. Adjusters are more present in terms of making things happen, even though it's outside of the norm. And more importantly, the court now is better positioned to do a lot of the things virtually. And to the extent things are not able to be done virtually, they are accommodating the current environment of the pandemic. I know recently we've had an arbitration, and although there were two different positions, whether we should do it in person or electronically, both parties agreed to a common medium and we got it done early January. So the reality is that we're moving forward with the new changes, and we're elated that it's back to business, back to reality and getting things done.
Zoom meetings took over for a while, but they're still here.
The legal profession is such that where it's based on the idea of human interaction. Our job essentially is to argue on our client's behalf and be persuasive. And it's much, much more challenging to do it virtually and to do it via Zoom. And obviously, all of us are more persuasive when it's done in person. And a lot of trials, you have the jury, you have the judge, you have your client, and simple physical gestures, eye contact, smile, says so much about the case and who you are and your character, and to take that away was a disservice. So I'm excited to the idea that we're slowly coming back to our normal proceedings.
Even though complications are there and difficulties, you get the job done.
We have to get the job done. Initial position, we didn't know how long the lockdown was going to last, but we knew that we have to carry the torch, and we really never stopped. So we're excited that the future looks bright, and we as an industry have embraced the change and have embraced the ability to move forward.
Mariam, what are the projections for this year in regards to increased demand for personal injury cases?
Essentially, and this is unfortunate, but traumatic and severe and catastrophic injuries are on a rise. And this is not just me saying as to what I'm seeing on the ground, but statistically there's strong evidence for 2020, 2021, and now we're leaning into 2022, where these types of cases are on the rise. A couple of reasons for that. People are anxious because of the current environment. People are distracted. There's a big community that's angry for various reasons. And more importantly, the distraction and the anger kind of lends itself to more catastrophic injuries, because when a human being is distracted, then the chances of an injury are much, much higher. So the prediction is that this is going to continue, and what we have to do is we have to educate our community, provide safety tips. A lot of times our firm will do tips on how to avoid collisions, simple tips, but I think
and not to be reckless?
Not to be reckless, but when we're distracted, when we're angry, when we're anxious, those are inevitable events that can be prevented. So a lot of times we kind of preach the idea of taking a step back, calming, and be understanding of the environment and what we're dealing with, so that these types of injuries can be prevented. But the projection is that, unfortunately, catastrophic injuries are on the rise, and we have to be prepared within our society, within our community, to be vigilant about safety and all of the measures that can be taken to prevent injuries. We always think tomorrow is a given, but in reality, life is a split-second decision. When launching this firm, I tragically lost my brother at the age of 43, and it makes you question your values, your position, your outlook in life. And in that moment, not only did I have to be strong for my loved ones, I had to be strong for my team.
I had one specific situation where we lost more than half of our entire staff in one day. We were really hiring out of desperation. It was toxic, it was extremely difficult. I had gotten to the point where I didn't even want to go to the office.
I had a team member who I considered my left hand at my family law practice abruptly leave. That employee had been very resistant to any change, and when she left, I was forced to restructure my entire law firm.
Stopping was just not an option. I had to carry on. I only had 3 people. I had to team up, bring in more people, and I realized that if you simply ask for help, others will rise to the challenge.
I was extremely stressed out, I was concerned, and I realized that my never again moment was never allowing team members that don't belong to take control over who we are as a firm, as an organization.
I'm recognizing that one bad apple can ruin the whole barrel, and I have made it a priority to make sure that the team culture and the attitude is positive, so that the effects on the others are positive.
Overnight, we became a team of 10, and we grew exponentially. I know this growth would not have happened had I not let go.
Now that I look back, it really opened my eyes to how important it is in who you're bringing into your firm.
Never again will I ever allow a team member to dictate the direction of my law firm or how I manage my staff.
Never again.
Never again.
Never again.
When we take on a client, it's really a sad beginning, because really you don't ever want that case to come through your doors, especially when it could have been avoided altogether. So I think prevention is the starting point, but when it does happen, then at least we're in a position to render help to those families and individuals that are in need of channeling those moot waters of personal injury trial.
If you can share some details, challenges of a successful case.
You know, there's so many cases, and I have so many off the top of my head, but the ones that really do stand out is when you connect with the client, connect with the family. And one particular case does stand out. Recently, we just came back from an arbitration, I mentioned to you, a beautiful young family, a mom driving back from picking up her kids, going home, and somebody on the freeway lost control and collided with their vehicle, and it was a traumatic experience. None of us can take that back, even though we all might desire to do so. So what does our profession lend ours to do? We can only bring in a monetary resolution, which does not equate to the trauma, but it at least gives a beautiful family the closure that they deserve. They can put that behind them and move on. Now, in this case, the reason it stands out is a lot of us think that when the unfortunate happens, we are protected. We have insurances that are going to step in and do so. Unfortunately, the industry is set up otherwise, right? The industry is set up just like any other corporate industry where they look at bottom line. Bottom line comes down to financial gain for these corporate entities. So our job is really to pierce through that corporate want of saving money, saving costs, and have them look at the file from a human element of look at this beautiful young family, look at the trauma that it has caused, look at the injuries that they've suffered, and as a result, when you start presenting them in that light, then all the doors open up and you bring in the settlement that this beautiful family is deserving of, and then some. But when you're dealing with your own insurance, it's much, much harder to do. And what stands out to me is the cooperation between our law firm and the family itself, because they were patient enough and trustworthy to the process that they waited 2 years for this resolution. And I'm excited to share that we got the best possible resolution for them. And I'm elated because it proves to the client and to us that the system is there, designed to allow the resolution that everybody's seeking. You just need to have the standing, the belief, and the articulation of bringing a resolution and have confidence in the system.
And not only, you always manage to shift priorities.
Well, I take on clients that are deserving of the representation, but I only take on clients that I am able to connect with on emotional level, because to me that's very, very important.
Sometimes even on a personal level.
Well, even on a personal level, that's priority, but the emotional is even more important, because if I'm going to go into battle for a client, then I need to understand their story. I need to internalize their story and be able to argue on their behalf. And we did that, and I'm elated that this family got the closure that they're deserving.
You've mentioned once that injury dictates the settlement. Can you please elaborate?
It sounds common sense, but a lot of times there's confusion as to how we evaluate a case and how is the settlement reflective of the injury. And I try to explain to my injured clients is the case is driven by the injury. And unfortunately, the more severe the injury is, then the battle becomes harder and the stakes become higher. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And the way we tend to break that down for an injured client is it's a process, and we have to be able to document the injury, the severity of that injury, and the duration of that injury. So as you can imagine, a permanent injury is valued very different from an injury that is here temporarily. And that is why a lot of times, most common question a client will ask me is, Mariam, I'd like to know a specific timeline to my case. And my answer, even though they're not happy with that answer, is a typical attorney answer. It depends. And it depends on the evaluation of the injury. We need to identify the injury and we need to document that injury and then understand whether this is a permanent injury or a temporary injury. When it becomes a permanent injury, sure, the value of the case goes up and the settlement opportunity goes up, but this person is now permanently injured. And that's always a bad result for me. So the correlation is there. The understanding, for the most part, is there, but it takes a lot of friction between me and the injured party and understanding why a certain case might take 2 years or another case on a different note might take 6 months. So the reality is the settlement and the timeline is always tied to the injury itself.
You don't just give promises, you promise and deliver.
That is why it's very important to be very, very open and very, very transparent with the client, even though that might be hard for them to hear. Because if your starting position is honest and open, that conversation might be initially unpleasant. In the long term, it's always appreciated. I've never met a client who later hasn't reached out and saying, you know, you said this was gonna unfold this way and this is exactly what happened. I appreciate the candidness, because I tell them even when we're consulting that other people might make you other promises. That's just not the position I'm going to be taking, because that is not the right position to be taking. There's so many variables in a personal injury case. The variables are not within my control, and they're not even within the control of my injured client. They're with the third party. So when they retain my services, I then have to go and start documenting all the variables and then come back and present a new timeline and a new strategy to my injured client.
It's not easy. On one hand, you have the expectations of your clients, and on the other, you have the reality.
And my job is really to merge the two worlds into a concise story for my client to understand and internalize and allow me to deliver. And that's really the challenge of a PI attorney, because when somebody's injured, they're in pain. When somebody's injured, they're anxious. When somebody's injured, they're most likely feeling the financial burden. And then if you layer in the fact that maybe they're the primary provider for the family, or there's responsibilities that they were used to taking on now are unable to. So all of those challenges become my challenges, and I have to slowly address each one of them in a methodical manner to prepare them for the journey that we're about to take.
And as you said, in the long run, they're happy.
Our world is changing very, very fast, and I think with COVID and everything else that has happened, I think we're going back to the basics, and I truly believe that the basics are being honest with one another, being kind with one another, and more importantly, being trusting with one another is why we're moving in the right direction.
I know that you were in Georgia, Atlanta, at the National Convention for Attorneys.
Yes, I was invited to Georgia, Atlanta to participate in a national convention where attorneys, business owners, law firm owners.
As one of the successful female attorneys.
Well, I was on a panel, and they wanted to really understand what it takes to be female and to be a law firm owner, and what are the challenges and what are some of the success stories. And it was impressive to present, because not only am I female, but I'm also Armenian, so it was nice to represent our community. And to know that we're being recognized within the industry, I think it's important. And giving voice to everyone out there that's maybe, is unsure about where they're headed, or validate those dreams that people live out. So it was very exciting to be in Georgia, Atlanta. It was very exciting to meet other business owners. And the panel was so empowering. We had women from different walks, but the commonality was that women are able to multitask. Females exude empathy, and I think that's our secret weapon. When you empathize and when you put yourself in the shoes of the other, especially when they're injured and they're at their lowest point, there's an instant connection that cannot be replicated. And I think the panelists were speaking to that, and it's great to know that I wasn't the only one thinking that. When they spoke about that, everybody's eyes lit up, because empathy is the most important trait in this business. We have to empathize with the injury in order to be the best possible advocates. And I was proud to be on that panel, and I was proud. I had my husband and my paralegal in the audience. I was proud.
Well, we take pride in your success.
Thank you so much.
You make everything sound so easy. However, I know that you go through challenges on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Ditto, as they say. But challenges are ever present, and that's part of the exciting nature of our everyday. However, our industry in particular is very challenging, very challenging in different arrays. But the particular challenge for me that I find is the idea that our potential client is not well informed, and we are in an industry where everybody has an opinion, so people already walk into this through this door with preconceived notions of how it should be. So the challenge is always the friction that's created between what they were told and what you're now telling them. And a lot of times you gotta merge those two worlds comfortably, merge those two worlds gently so that there's no disconnect, and that takes a lot of work. Another challenge that I face a lot is community driven. Our community in particular is known to kind of already know before anything is triggered of how things should be, and that's overwhelming but manageable, because my starting point is always the idea that if I tell the client the steps, then they're able to anticipate and better yet participate in the process. Because a lot of people that walk in think that I'm going to be doing all the heavy lifting and they just have the expectation. No, it's the other way around. The reality is I do my part in lifting the heavy, and the injured party has
They have to do their homework. They
their
have to be on the
homework.
same page with you.
They have a part in this play. It's a movie, and we all have our role that we need to work on. And that's the challenge. Another challenge in having a law practice is having an amazing team. I'm fortunate that I do have an amazing team, but with the global pandemic, that was challenging. But I think in looking back, we survived. We did a good job retaining our amazing team members. But as we're growing, I'm finding it difficult to attract amazing talent, and I had to become creative in finding good candidates, because having the best team is really a reflection of the work that's going to be produced. So having strong members of your team is also challenging.
And I think expanding during the pandemic is one of the greatest challenges.
It is a challenge, but when you come from the ideology, which I'm sure all parents say to their children who are creating new families, when you ask mom, dad, when is the best time to have a baby? They say the best time is when you're ready, and you're always really never ready. You just do it. So I think expansion is also similar to that, where when there is the need, then you have to leap in and do it, right? When you don't look at everything else, you just look at what's important and what needs to be done. So I think our expansion was needed, even though it was in the middle of the pandemic, and we got it done. And looking back, I'm so glad that we did it.
As always, it was amazing to catch up with you.
And it's always amazing to catch up and see you and your smile, your vibrant smile, and allowing me to be with your audience from time to time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A lot of it is holding their hand as they make these leaps in getting better and healing. If you've been injured, let us help bring the care that you deserve.
For advertising on Inside TV, please call 818-653-0199.